Let's get personal,
Yeah.
personal.
I like having you guys on the webinars because you provide that soundtrack that's sorely
Yep.
missing in other webinars. We're going to be talking about email personalization today. We're going to be going over some examples of really good email personalization and then talking about how to actually personalize your own email campaigns, what makes for good email personalization, how you can actually pull it off in your own campaigns. I'm Jason Rodriguez. I'm the community and product evangelist over at Litmus. You probably know me from other Litmus webinars, the Litmus live events, and over on the blog. I'm joined today by Matthew Smith and Mike Nelson from Really Good Emails. Feel free to say hi, guys.
Hey, hey, hey.
Awesome. So I'm excited to have you guys. We've done a couple of webinars now, and people seem to like our kind of banter around email design and giving people some good tips and stuff. So I'm excited to get into personalization today because it turns out there's a lot of cool companies doing some really cool things with personalization. But I guess the first question is, what is email personalization? To me, I kind of came up with this quick definition that gives you the basics. It's all about using information about a specific subscriber to customize an email, either through cadence of that send, the content in a campaign, or the design itself. I feel like a lot of people kind of know intuitively what personalization is in email. But Matthew, I know you had a couple of thoughts about how this could sometimes be a limiting definition of personalization, about how we should maybe go a little bit broader when we think about personalization.
Are you saying I'm opinionated? That
Never,
would be
never.
accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So, in my way of thinking, the relationship with the customer's data points, the things that they are doing, or maybe their birth date and their name and those kinds of things, that's just one part, right? But like in a relationship, you end up creating a thing, a separate thing between the two parties, right? So like in a good relationship, you remember things that the person said
Hmm.
recently that matter to them. You remember important dates. You remember and kind of celebrate keystones or milestones. And that ends up being, a really effective way of like building trust and creating integrity, right? In the relationship. So for me, I think a great one is to, note the first product that was purchased and just say thanks, like remembering that, or the day we first started dating, as a company and a customer, these kinds of things. It can be a fun way to like actually take care of the relationship itself. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like a lot of times in email marketing, we tend to focus on specific data points and almost treat subscribers like they're just entries in a database somewhere. So I do like that point of trying to make it a little bit more personal, for lack of a better term, a little bit more human, and thinking about how you would treat that person if you were talking to them in real life and had that kind of friendship or that relationship. So I totally agree. I think there's plenty of opportunities that a lot of email marketers could take advantage of to grow a little bit more of a human relationship and create that better relationship, that better experience for subscribers. So just a little food for thought as we start going through some of these examples and talking about what you can and can't do with email personalization. Mike, why should we be personalizing emails in the first place?
I knew you were going to ask me that question, so I went and did a lot of research. No, actually, it took me like 3 seconds to find like 800 stats on personalization. So we all know if you've been doing it at all in any form, in the simplest form, you know that it helps. So I went and found, I think this is the first one I found from Campaign Monitor. But you know that if somebody is talking to you one-to-one, you're more likely to open that and engage with that. And I think it was interesting that those that were personalized in some manner had not just like a 26% increase in conversion or revenue that are made from it, but 760% increase in revenue, which I found really awesome. So people are willing to spend with you more, the more likely you are to be that individualized emailer for them.
Yeah, totally. I like it's moving beyond that batch and blast mentality, which so many marketers kind of still have, which sucks that they still have that because we do have that data. We do have the capabilities in our tools to create these more personalized experiences. But I love that people that are sending personalized emails see massive increases in opens and then revenue that comes from those email campaigns. So I feel like this is kind of the perfect stat. This is the only one you really need. If you're not doing personalization, then you're probably losing out on potentially a lot of money and a lot of those good relationships with your subscribers. So when it comes to personalization, what can email marketers actually personalize in an email campaign? Most people are familiar with something like this merge tag, this first name. Most of us have added this into an email campaign. We'll say, hello, Mike, this is your offer for today. It's really basic kind of text replacement, but there's a lot of things you can do beyond that, which we'll look at some examples later on and how to do more dynamic content using text replacement. Beyond that, though, there's a couple of things you can do as well. You can do image personalization, which I know really good emails, you guys have done a lot of cool things, which we'll see a couple of examples later on. But images are kind of one of the main things that people think of too when they're thinking about personalization. And there's a lot of good examples of people customizing images based on, sales or coupons or specific information about the subscriber. And I think that's a really cool example. And a lot of companies doing creative things with that. If you're getting really advanced, though, you could do wholesale custom designs for your subscribers based on their preferences, based on the data you have about them, based on their behaviors with your company. And this gets into a little bit more advanced stuff, more custom scripting, a lot of design considerations when you're building out your templates. But it's a good example of how you can get really advanced if you have the capabilities and the resources to do that. Personalization doesn't just have to be that really basic first name text replacement that so many people are just kind of default to. There's a lot of things you can do beyond that that will create these really interesting experiences for the people getting your email campaigns. So I would encourage everybody to look beyond just that really basic first name stuff, because while that feels like personalization, it's pretty lackluster at this point. Most people are savvy enough to know that you're just using some quick automated merge tag to populate that, and it doesn't feel truly personalized. So if you can move beyond that, get into more dynamic content, get into better data that you're pulling into those campaigns, and even customizing and tailoring that campaign, the design itself and the content inside of that campaign to the subscriber, I think you're going to see a lot better results for your email marketing campaigns.
Yeah, I think there's a good amount of pain points there too when people are trying to build their own. If you're coming across some pain points, go ahead and put them in chat to know where you're coming along so we can follow up later on.
Yeah, totally. There's varying levels of sophistication between those three kind of tiers of personalization. So I'm sure there's a lot of challenges across each of those tiers. So yeah, feel free to hop in the chat and ask any questions about that. We did want to show off a couple of examples of personalization that we've done in our own companies. So Litmus, a lot of you have probably seen this email. We sent out about some of our ebooks and our reports that we produce. And this is where we try to look at the behavior of our subscribers and what they've read before and try to match that up with a suggestion about what other report or what other ebook they might really enjoy reading. So we had a couple of different content blocks in here, and then based on what that subscriber had read, we'll remind them that they read that and they can reread it if they want to, but then we suggest these other awesome reports that they would probably find just as valuable as that original report. So we were really proud of this one. Our email team, especially our head email developer, Alice Lee, did some great work to enable this personalization and these custom content blocks. But we thought it was a really good example of not just doing really basic text replacement, but customizing the content and the design of the campaign itself based on the subscriber's past behavior and then what they might like doing it in the future.
Yeah, when I got this email, I was like, this is sweet. And then I went and dove into it. I mean, it was super cool. The text was being replaced, the background images, the little edge color, so the black and the purple was even changing. It was just such a nice touch. So congratulations on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, all props go to Alice for that one. I had nothing to do with this email, but I am proud and happy to take all the compliments and stuff. You guys have done some awesome stuff, especially with images, with your really good emails newsletter. So feel free to tell us a little bit about that and how you go about doing that.
We really wanted just to focus on the simplest way of that first name and how you can expand that just really easily through images. So what we did is we took the first name, which is really easy, is that merge tag. And then we went and wrote a wrap name for that individual. How we actually ended up doing it was just take the first letter of their name and then sorting our data, exporting that to Excel spreadsheet, making a wrap name with the same first letter, and then re-importing that into another database, and then referencing that wrap name that was dynamically written onto an image that served up for the individual. So it seemed really personalized for them, and we had tons of people that were sharing their rap names on social, which I don't think anyone's ever shared a screenshot of an email in my life. And this was like, oh, cool. People really resonated with this one.
Yeah, I like this. It reminds me of like the old, like the Wu-Tang Clan, like name generators and stuff that used to be like all over the place back in the day. It's what is it, like Childish Gambino? I think he got his name from a Wu-Tang Clan name generator, which is awesome. Yeah, I like this too because it's like it doesn't just use stock photography or something with text just like dumped on top of it. It really fits well with your overall brand and that illustration style, which is awesome. How about this one?
This one's a little bit more complicated. We wanted to really connect with people. We read the study that when people see their own faces, they're more likely to look at what's in front of them because they're trying to figure out why their face is on there. So if you had recently created a profile on Really Good Emails, we went and pulled that image of your profile into the email and put it on a little slant so that it kind of stood out a little bit more. Put your name on there. There's Jason's profile that we just saw. And if we didn't have your image, then we created a variety of default images. So you have like an astronaut, a sailor, some other ones that showed up, and we randomized those images for those people that we didn't have images for, just to kind of grow some variety out of that whole thing. And if we didn't have their name, then it's just a default of Email Geek that we use typically. But this one had a ton of interest in people actually jumping in and updating their profiles if their profile image wasn't there.
Nice.
So it was a really good engagement in terms of what the plan of this email was. We weren't really trying to get them to do anything other than jump in and see their profiles. So worked out for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like that's cool. Like there's not really any real like revenue driver kind of thing here. This is more, I like that that's more kind of organic, like just fun thing to do. So it's using personalization to derive that kind of community aspect of it, other than just like here's a coupon for something and go, it's customized for you and go take advantage of it. I really like this one as well.
Yeah, one of the biggest considerations and is how to do this for people that you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So if you're doing some type of profile image or something related to the individual with an illustration, we had to be very considerate of like, does that image look like a man or a woman? And does that, if their name is, Mike and it looks like a female, are they going to be offended? We kept this like really strong pink tone, hopefully not offending people if their skin color was not that color. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into when you're trying to dynamically do personalization and you don't have all the information about the individual. You kind of just have to go at all ends to make sure that the offense, you're not trying to trigger anything off of that.
Yeah, totally. I imagine this is probably one of the biggest pain points for most people doing personalization is what do those fallbacks look like? And will it still speak to our subscribers and not piss anybody off? I know there's some examples out there too of like companies sending Mother's Day kind of things to subscribers that like their mother might have just recently died, or like different periods of the year, like holidays or events that can be painful experiences for subscribers. So I think anytime you can take that into account and be a little bit more, exhibit that empathy for your subscribers and what you would want to see or wouldn't want to see is a good way to create that better, more personalized relationship with people.
I was talking to somebody recently about the definition of empathy, or like what empathy is when it's felt. And they nuanced it in a way that I thought was really interesting, which is it's not necessarily understanding how the other feels. It's an attempt to understand how they feel.
Yeah.
And that attempt shows initiative and care and value, right? The other way to like look at some of this kind of thing is actually to get ahead of the curve and say things like, hey, isn't this funny? This is what we think we know about you. Where did we get it wrong? And if you spin it right, I think it's not creepy. It ends up being something like, we really want to serve you just the stuff you need, because it turns out you don't love trolling through thousands of products that you don't need. So if this feels valuable to you, fill out this information. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. We'll keep sending you the best we can. That kind of thing, so that you're always offering your customer more than what you're asking for from them. And then that's the value that they end up feeling served by the email or served by the personalization, instead of it feeling like we're trying to get into your mind, and take over. I think there's something there in that empathy that should drive the personalization.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a great way. Like another pain point is just what data do you use to personalize emails? So if you can present that and like send surveys or try to ask people for that data up front, you'll get better data and you'll show that you're trying to understand them. I totally agree. That's a great way to try to get more information about your subscribers so that you can personalize things a little bit better. So we're kind of curious here. Is anybody doing personalization in their own emails? We're going to do a quick poll and see how many of you are personalizing your emails. It doesn't really matter what level, what kind of tier you're at, or how kind of advanced you are. Just let us know with this poll whether or not you're personalizing some aspect of your email campaigns or if you haven't even started down that path yet.
12 seconds later.
So it looks like about 86% of you are doing some form of personalization in your emails, and then 14% are not currently personalizing emails, which is interesting. We've done a lot of studies at Litmus around this, and it kind of reflects that same data, is that a lot of people are doing some form of personalization. And that's good to see, but there's still a lot of pain points around how to do it better. There's different aspects of email campaigns that people are personalizing, and there's different data points that they're using. So there's still a lot of room for improvement when it comes to personalization, which is good to see. And we did this, our state of email survey, which we've been doing for a couple of years now, which is a great way to get a bunch of data about what people are doing in email marketing. And one of the questions was, what aspect of that email campaign do you actually personalize? And these were the top 5 answers. So most people are doing, the number one thing was that text in the body of an email. So that's really that kind of basic, just text substitution using merge tags or like lightweight dynamic content scripting. Subject lines came up number 2. Those tend to be really easy as well because they just use those merge tags in most ESPs. Preview text works the same way. 4th was using images in the body of an email. So that's getting up to that kind of second tier, using a little bit more advanced stuff, whether you're doing that in-house or using a third-party service to customize those images. And then I thought it was interesting. Number 5 was the footer content. So honestly, I kind of want to dig into that a little bit more with like some follow-up questions to survey respondents and see what exactly in the footer they're customizing. Most people will customize something like the email address you're sending to for like the unsubscribed text and stuff like that. But I'm curious to see what people are doing in the footer. So if you have done anything in the footer of your email campaigns, then feel free to add that into the chat. I'd love to hear about it.
What comes to mind on footer is the morning brew, the hustle, the skim.
Ooh, yeah.
They all have how many people you referred to those things. That's a personalization. And then they may have like how many times you've opened or how many times you've read in the past week or past month or something like that too.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the referrals and stuff, and that seems to be a bigger and bigger thing, especially in just like the newsletter world. So that makes perfect sense. When it comes to the data they're using to drive that personalization, the number one answer was just the basics, like that person's name, the company name that they work for, just really basic level subscriber data. Number 2 was customer status, so whether or not they're an active customer, whether they've, part of some sort of membership or loyalty program. Number 3, I thought was interesting. It was location-based data. So geolocation, local stores, things like that. So I think that's a really good and kind of interesting way to tailor your content to subscribers if you do have that data. And we'll look at like where you could kind of pull that data from as well. This one's great. Past interactions and purchases was number 4. So looking at that past behavior, seeing what they've done, and then tailoring that content based on those past purchases and past interactions with the company. And then I really like number 5. This is kind of what you were speaking to, Matthew, about expressed interests. So tracking their interests, trying to predict what they might find valuable from your company. So it's good to see there in the top 5 that people are trying to get that information and learn about their subscribers and personalize those emails based on that data. So where would you actually find this data? Like, you know what you can personalize an email campaign, some of the data points that you could use, but how do you actually collect some of that? So we talked about this a little bit, but the first thing is just try to use the tools you already have available to you try to figure out that subscriber behavior, their interests. So this is using things like your ESP's analytics, using something like Litmus email analytics, which will allow you to see how long they're engaging with certain campaigns, do geolocation targeting, see what email clients they're actually using. So you can kind of personalize that experience from a design perspective, make sure it works for your audience. But beyond that, there's a lot of different sources that you can use to collect this data. So obviously you should be relying on those analytics from your ESP, using third-party tools like Litmus Email Analytics. Google Analytics is a huge driver in the email marketing world. We've done other research for State of Email, asking what people use to track their campaigns and their performance, and there's no surprise that Google Analytics is the top tool for most people since it is free, or if you're using G Suite as part of your company, then it's included there as well. Website behavior is another big source of data that you can pull. So syncing up with your website team, trying to understand what people are clicking on, what their interests are, what their past purchase behavior happens to be, and then syncing that up with your ESP is a good way to go. Surveys, I think, is a massively underutilized thing, kind of like Matthew was talking about, is anytime you can ask people what they want, what they need from your email marketing program is going to give you way better data than trying to analyze their website behavior or figuring out, just making assumptions about their behavior based on Google Analytics or something like that. Purchasing data and then email interactions too is a good way to see what people are doing. So looking at specific interactions inside email campaigns themselves, using things like interactive emails, interactive surveys, stuff like that to try to get that data. So lots of different sources you can pull from. And I know one of the pain points is probably going to be trying to get that data, get your hands on that data, or working with other teams to analyze that data. But anything you can do is going to give you more information to learn about your subscribers, then personalize your campaigns based on that information. So we looked at a couple of different things, what personalization is, how you do it a little bit. We'll get into some more of the mechanics later on. But really want to spend a lot of this webinar talking about who's really good at email personalization. So we pulled a bunch of examples of email campaigns from companies doing personalization really well. And we're just going to kind of walk through those and talk about why they might work, why they don't work, room for improvement, and try to give you guys some inspiration for improving your own email campaigns and sending better personalized messages. So this first one, I think, Mike, you dumped this into the slides here. Talk us through this Gas Buddy email example.
Yeah, I use this example all over the place, so apologies if someone's heard me speak on this before. I'm just a massive fan of all the stats that they have been able to gather about you, and then holistically within their entire environment and compare you to the environment. The first part is that little GIF there that of the moving road is nice touch to kind of bring you in, but then you kind of see like what this is all about, where it says, there are people that are fuel efficient. That's like the general population within Denver. That's a location that you live in, right? So that's personalized on the location. You kind of get down where it says 86% of drivers locally are safer and more fuel efficient than you are. So this is kind of like you're a crappy driver. Like, why?
I love that. Yeah. It's like nagging you, just forcing you to try to be a little bit more accountable. I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's like big and bold, like right in your face. You spend so much time in your car, but having that data kind of regurgitated back to you in a really clear visual email is just so nice sometimes, especially when you're comparing yourself to other people to change behavior. So that's why I love this one. I think, it hits so many points, to personalize the individual, the region, the entire database. There's so many good things on here.
Yeah, I really like this, your driving habits recap towards the bottom here. I like that not only does it present that data about your own behavior, but it gives you some suggestions to improve that behavior too. So that, try coasting to a stop instead of doing a hard brake, or try to stay within the speed limit to improve your fuel efficiency. I like that it's not just that data about your behavior, but trying to give you some practical tips to improve that behavior. And maybe you won't be worse off than 80%, 86% of the population of Denver when it comes to driving.
Yeah, I think you look at that driving habit recap, the logic to build that is pretty complicated. So let's think if what happens if someone didn't hard brake that whole month? What's the default when that happens?
Yeah.
When you start comparing yourself to other people, there's a lot more logic that goes into how to build that email. And so just big kudos to Gas Buddy for this one.
So how about this Grammarly one? I feel like this is one that a lot of people have probably seen because there's tons of users of Grammarly, but it's this really great kind of recap of your writing habits for the week. Walk us through this one too.
Grammarly emails are the most submitted to reallygoodemails.com, and probably because just a lot of people use them, but their emails are just so spot on visually telling you how you've interacted with that app. So prior where it's like Gas Buddy was how you drove your car. Again, this is kind of another extension of that. It's all based on your own productivity. But then they also have a lot of things in here to make you better, similar to what we saw in Gas Buddy. And then it just visually shows you pie graphs and bar charts and things like that too, which we didn't see in the previous example, but just another visual example of how you can bring other elements into an email.
Yeah, I like this because it's not just like there's a lot of that kind of text replacement, but I really love the visual element of the graphs here. But I think that's something that I would love to see more in email marketing. I love a good graph, a good chart. So anytime somebody can work that into an email, then you'll make me happy as a subscriber. I really like the kind of gamification too. So it has that Grammarly writing streak right front and center. So you can see, what achievements you've had or what that next achievement is. I feel like that gamification is a fun element here too, just based on your personal data.
Yeah, I think if you relate this to people on the webinar listening in, people may be like, oh, I have a consumer product. I don't know the consumption rate of my customers, or I publish an article that's in a newspaper. But any way you can figure out maybe how many times they logged into your website, or how many times they revisit, or how many times they open an email, those are all stats that you can kind of add in here for gamification.
Matthew, how about these? I know we have 2 Airbnb examples coming up here. Yeah, tell us about these ones a little bit.
So I'm a Airbnb host, and I use Airbnb a lot as I travel. And so it's nice to have like both sides of the marketplace and understand that a little bit. One of the things is living in South Carolina, we get hurricane things, and I'm able to sign up to be available to use my Airbnb for evacuees. And so this was an email that was specific to my location. So they're, just sending this to me. They're not sending it to anybody in San Francisco for obvious reasons. And then giving me more regional, not just do you want to sign up for this, but keeping me aware of what's happening and giving me a sense of whether I'm an evacuee or if I'm a host, like what is the story, what's being told. So they're serving me in a really meaningful way. And at a brand level, they're creating a community that is serving other people. And so this feels not just personalized, but just a really effective set of emails that takes the narrative forward. So, obviously they had a situation here. This is not pulling from some kind of database because there's not 30 hurricanes happening concurrently in the United States. So, this was a content team that they put together to write these specific emails with specific links, but they segmented only the people that would be appropriate for this. And that just felt very caring, very thoughtful. So I've been really stoked to see that effect, and I enjoy their emails. They're extremely easy to read. And so, I'm able to see the information that's important to me very quickly. So I've been impressed.
Yeah, you talk about empathy, and I feel like this is one of those emails that just screams empathy, I guess. I don't know how you'd phrase that, but it's showing that they care about not only their hosts and their customers, but it's going further and making sure that the community itself is safe, that you have the resources you need to help encourage that safety across the community, and doing it in a very clear way, which is awesome. I love that it has your guests that are coming up, gives you options to really quickly contact them to make sure that, they're okay, or if they want to drop their reservation or something like that. I feel like this is an amazing example of how to personalize emails and make it really effective for everybody involved. And I like that location data. It's not just about, what's your local store or something like that. It takes that location data and puts it to work in a really valuable way. The second one is a little bit different. So this would be for somebody that has a reservation and is making a trip for Airbnb, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So as I said, I like to travel a bunch and use Airbnb. So I've been really impressed with the way that when I'm scheduling a trip, like recently I went to Portland, and got just some fantastic recommendations, not only on things to do that might be related to the experiences that Airbnb offers, but also just some kind of heads up and weather information. And here's what things are looking like. All things that serve me as a traveler, things that I would otherwise need to go look up. And then they show me local events and all kinds of things that are related to my trip. So it ends up being I join Airbnb, I use Airbnb for a location to rest and sleep or stay. And I haven't personally gotten into the experiences, but as a customer, even if it's just something I can do, it feels really accommodating. And so they've just done a fantastic job of making this feel really like a service. And I always champion that, and that makes a big difference to me. So, they're getting the location right. If I were doing more experiences, one thing that would be neat to know is if they're actually relating experiences based on my behavior. But based on other interactions I've had with Airbnb, I wouldn't be surprised. And that's the opportunity here is if I do these experiences and I've shown that I really like pottery, then they could promote pottery within Berkeley in this experience. Or if surfing is my thing, then show this. So there's lots of neat opportunities. I think little things like showing a map on an experience like this of the city, helping people get to know the city, facts about the city would be cool. So there's even more that I think can be done. But to me, the best question to ask again is to get into a relationship with your customer and think about what would be a neat way to, like if my sister were traveling to Berkeley and I had a day to put a little like care package together, what would be in that care package? And that's the opportunity to do here. If we can think that way with our customers, I think we move away from treating people as numbers and we look at how to be really human, and then we enhance it using data and analytics and get more specific with our personalization. So it's not kind of throwing a wide net, but you're able to get quite meaningful with the customer. And I love that.
What I liked about this one was that two big things, that they matched the day Thursday with the date as a nice extra touch, because they're actually looking at a calendar and matching those days up somehow, which was cool. But the other thing was that this doesn't necessarily have to be transactional data. It can be search data. So someone has given that consent behavior that they are interested in this location on these dates. Maybe they didn't actually check out, but now that you have that data assigned to the person who's logged in or has come through an email in the past and may have cookied them, you have additional data to build up that personalization about that individual.
Yeah, I totally agree. So it's less about, you don't have to use transactional data all the time, but you can kind of make some of those assumptions and track that behavior, which I guess that kind of gets into, there's always in the tech world privacy related debates and stuff like that, but you can do it in a lightweight, kind of non-intrusive manner and make some of those assumptions about subscribers and send an email like this.
You can also ask, let's say I search on Airbnb for Berkeley, and then right at the top of the page, would it be helpful if we sent you information about Berkeley and similar locations for your travel plans? Yes or no? That gets down to relationship, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing you can do is you can send emails that would say something like, which would you rather see more of? More about places like Berkeley or more about places like New York? The customer can select that and it not necessarily trigger like a browser connection, but just it's an action that hits a URL and then triggers the API endpoint to change something in their data set. And then now you have that information about them. To me, that's the excitement about modern email, is it doesn't have to just be like a flyer that takes you to the web.
Yeah.
It ends up being its own interactive messaging tool. I love that.
Yeah, totally. All right, this next one is from Strava, and this is one of those emails I feel like I've used in so many different presentations, but I feel like it has a lot going for it. So right off the bat, I love the design of this just from like typography and color standpoint. It's really bold. It's really exciting. But they do a really good job of pulling in people's data. So Strava tracks your bike rides, your exercise, so they can show you how active you've been, how long you've been on a bike ride or a run, your total elevation, all that kind of stuff. But I also like that they do a good job of comparing that data to past performance. So you get this total time and kind of compare it month over month in an interesting graphic way using this graph. But one of my favorite things is this is, while it looks like it's very nicely designed, really bold colors and stuff, this is essentially all pretty basic text replacement. So if you were to turn images off, this still all works. All this data, all this typography is still there, because they're just using HTML and CSS to style all of that text. So it seems more advanced than it likely is, but it works really well, even when images are disabled, which I think is a huge benefit for most subscribers. So I really like that aspect. It uses personalization, but it uses it really effectively and creatively using basic tools like HTML and CSS.
I also thought it interesting on this one, where the second content block is share your Strava stats. Like, they know this is stuff to brag about, right?
Yeah.
And most emails aren't. It allows them to get their word of mouth out about Strava a lot faster because you're sharing your own stats that you receive from them.
Totally. Another kind of roundup one was this email from Sweetness, which I really liked because it was a good mix of personalized kind of that text replacement with the surrounding illustrations and graphics of the email. So I really like the stuff in the word bubbles is just that text that they're going to be replacing. But the way it's designed, it feels very graphic. It feels very interesting. I feel like they have a good, they tie that back into this main promo, which is this $25 in booking credits. So it's a good mix of like personalized historical content with trying to get you to take future action. The one that I like using this example as kind of a cautionary example as well, because you can see on the right here, there's this, we're glad you took this trip and you were part of the 705 million vacations that, or you weren't part of the 705 million vacations that went unused, because you went to Los Angeles and you stayed, and that has this really long description of your room. So you went to Los Angeles and stayed in a standard room with one king size bed, non-smoking at this hotel. Like, it's one of those things where I feel like a little bit of data cleaning could work out a little bit better. It's one of those things like, yeah, you have that data, but do you really need to tell them, remind them that they were in a standard room with one king size bed that was non-smoking? Like, it just seems like a really awkward kind of thing. So I feel like this is a good example of looking at the data, testing out different data points that subscribers will actually see in that email campaign, and making sure that it makes sense for them, that it's not confusing, it's not awkward, it sounds natural and helpful, as opposed to just saying, I have this data point, I want to pull it in an email, and regardless of what it looks like, here's where it is, you know? So I think they're doing a lot of good things here, but it is a good example of trying to reframe some of that data a little bit better, or think about whether or not that's useful for people. Iterable sends this beautiful yearly roundup email about how many campaigns you sent, how many experiments you ran, all these really interesting data points that email marketers love seeing. And I think they do a really good job of tying in different resources for those different data points. So you can see that, we sent 650 campaigns. I can go look at this benchmark report and see how my campaigns compare. I ran this many experiments. Let's learn more about send time experiments to try to be more relevant for our subscribers. One thing that I feel like, again, they could take a lot of this data, and they have all this data about your email marketing campaigns, but maybe go even further with more personalized data around those campaigns. So like, this experiment section pops out to me. So you ran 65 different experiments. I'd love to see in a campaign like this, like, what was the top performing experiment, or what was the worst performing experiment, so that I could quickly compare those two things and try to figure out, like, why was this one better? Why did this one not work? Like, I feel like with data like this, there's even more room for opportunity to make it more valuable, or bubble up like more granular data related to this kind of yearly roundup, so that people can get more value out of that. And I think this is the last example we have. This one's from Lyft. And my first question, that looks like Matt Helbig from Really Good Emails in that screenshot there. Did he really take 397 Lyft rides in 2016? and travel 1,038 miles. Like, that was amazing to me. So I'm curious. I'm gonna have to like DM him or something and see if this is like a real email that he got. But I like that Lyft. Lyft, all their emails are just beautifully designed, like really clear, nice graphics, nice colors, all that stuff. But I like that they kind of incorporate this personal data with some quirky elements. So they have all these badges, different badges. So it pulls that data and it says, like, your rock star status for this category. You have this veteran badge, and it has that kind of quirkier illustration design to it. And again, with the gamification, like, it's using that personal data and then pulling in these badges and these different like levels that you can achieve to try to drive future usage of their platform. And then the last thing I really liked was that it, similar to that Strava one, that social sharing, like, they know people like sharing these things, so they give you ample opportunities to share that. So each of those badges, each of those sections has both a Facebook and a Twitter link, which makes it easy to share that personal data, take this email and recognize that the company is like knows a lot about you and they're trying to further this relationship, and then you can go and talk about it really quickly. So I think this is a good one, but I'm really curious whether or not Matt actually took almost 400 Lyft rides back in 2016, because that seems wild.
Yeah, this one's a few years old, and to me it seems like we were able to see that this happened 3-5 years ago, and yet it's still hard to find emails that do this well, which it could point to how hard it still is to get data on your customers or on your readers. It could point to that there's just not enough information out there to do this, or it's just too time consuming. People don't think there's going to be enough ROI in doing this kind of stuff. But yeah, I just love that we're still showing an example 3 years ago as a slide.
Yeah, it's like interactive email. I feel like there's examples from years ago that we're all still using in presentations and stuff, and we're trying to level everybody up to get to that point. So yeah, there's always work to be done, always new things to learn. So let's talk a little bit. We saw a bunch of examples of really good email personalization, but let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of email personalization. So again, we talked about the different kind of levels of personalization. There's basic text, you can use images, you can use dynamic content. But what does that actually look like in practice? So there's a couple of categories here we're going to walk through. The first one being personalizing images. So there's a couple of different ways to actually personalize those images in email. If you have the resources and the tools and the skills available, then a good option could be just doing that server side on your own. So setting up a server, writing the program that will customize that image, that'll pull in data, whether it's from a URL parameter that's transferred back to you, whether it's from an Excel sheet or a CSV file. But there's a lot of tools on the server side that allow you to customize those images on the fly and then serve them to a specific URL. But a lot of teams don't have those resources, don't have the time or skills to like dedicate to writing their own programs, their own scripts on the server. But there's a lot of ESP tools out there as well that allow you to add customization. I think Campaign Monitor has some tools that they recently introduced, Salesforce, MailChimp, they all have these different tools where you can take subscriber data, add them into images, and then it'll serve those for your campaigns. I know you guys have done a lot of experimenting with third-party services. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences using some of these tools for your own emails?
There's definitely a learning curve when you get in somebody else's system and you're trying to figure out, will my Google Sheets somehow connect through this into the system, and how do I connect this API through Zapier? There's that kind of issue. But once you kind of get it down, you can use your own like PSD files in some of these. Your layers are variables and named appropriately, and just sorts them out. So, there's probably a good 2-3 days of learning curve for us on these tools. But once you get it, it's like, oh, these are awesome. I want to use these for everything.
Text is probably the easiest thing that you can do for personalizing, which we kind of mentioned. You can use those merge tags. That first example is from MailChimp, their merge tag, which is fname, which is first name. So you can use really basic stuff like that. One thing I think most people need to think about, and everybody should be thinking about and taking into account, is just what that fallback happens to look like. So the second example is from Campaign Monitors, their merge tags and their kind of dynamic scripting tags. So you can see that they have full name and then they have a fallback that you can declare. So I think this is a really important thing where you want to test out a lot of different scenarios for that personalized data to make sure it still makes sense. So, great job friend doesn't really. That sounds kind of like No Country for Old Men, like Javier Bardem calling everybody friendo, before he kills them. Like you want to make sure that it sounds natural and sounds good, especially when you're using this basic kind of text personalization. So just something to keep in mind there is make sure you kind of read it out loud and it sounds human and not super creepy or anything like that. When you move beyond basic stuff, you can get into using more dynamic content. This is where it starts to get really interesting. So this example is actually from MailChimp's documentation about using just their basic logic. And most ESPs have some sort of lightweight scripting language. One that a lot of people are familiar with is AmpScript from Salesforce that you use with Salesforce Marketing Cloud. But you can use this to dynamically feed in different content blocks. So you can see here that if the subscriber has greater than 20 transactions, we give them a really nice coupon to reward them for being a loyal customer. If they have greater than 10 interactions but less than 20, then it's not as good a deal, but we still want to try to get their business. If they haven't done anything at all, then it just defaults back to this 10% off coupon. You can take this literally as far as you want for most ESPs and do really interesting things. I know in AmpScript you can do specific like table lookups and really interesting things with variables and customizing that content. But here it's really about knowing your customers, knowing your subscribers, figuring out how you can segment them, what kind of personalization you can do based on those data points and when you segment them, and then using this logical scripting inside of your SP, inside of your emails to customize that content based on their past behavior, their past purchases, different demographic information that you have about those subscribers. A couple of things to keep in mind though is when it comes to developing, there's some steps you can take to make it that much easier. Obviously, if you're doing something like using nifty images or movable ink and it's just the image, there's not a lot of work that goes in. Well, there's a lot of setup work, but when you pull it in your email, it's just an image tag for all intents and purposes. But when you get into that kind of dynamic scripting, that dynamic content, a couple of things you want to keep in mind from a development perspective. You really want to avoid repeating yourself as much as possible, which is just a good rule of thumb across the board when you're designing and coding and developing emails. And a good way to do that is use predefined snippets and partials. So if you start getting into this personalization, it's a really good idea to save those snippets that you're using really frequently, whether it's in something like Litmus Builder, because we have snippets and partials, whether it's in Dreamweaver, in your ESP, and you can kind of code up these little content blocks. But anytime you can save those and reuse them, you'll avoid copy and paste errors. Your efficiency, that workflow is way more efficient because you're not coding all this stuff from scratch, or you don't have to keep the documentation for something like AmpScript open all the time. So really focus on trying to figure out what pieces you're going to use frequently, save those as snippets and partials in whatever system you're using so that you're not copying and pasting, you're not introducing all these errors, and you can build these really cool personalized experiences a lot quicker. It really helps too to think about your email templates kind of like Legos as these modular components. So having something like a header in its own table or in its own div, depending on how you code emails, having these hero blocks or these offers or product grids are all these pieces that you can kind of work together. You can place them with different elements and it's not going to break your entire email design. And this is really interesting because when you get into more dynamic personalization, like using that scripting, one term I've heard is this hyper personalization. So you can use those modular components and you can automate the building of those entire campaigns. So essentially each subscriber gets a personalized email design with content, and the look and feel of it is all personal to that subscriber. And that can only happen if you're using these modular email templates that don't break as you move these different components around. And it can be helpful to create a design system to work towards that too. So identify those different components, identify those different parts, and have this design system that everybody can reference and know exactly what works how, so that you're all working from that same foundational level of design development, and you can build those a lot quicker. So just some things to keep in mind, but every ESP is a little bit different. There's a lot of tools out there, a lot of third-party tools that can help you with email personalization. So just research that kind of stuff. There's tons of great documentation. If your ESP doesn't have good documentation, then ask them for it. Ask to talk to somebody and figure out how you can personalize emails a little bit better. And hopefully you can start sending awesome personalized email campaigns. So hopefully, yeah, you've got a lot about what personalization is, how it works, and some inspiration for hopefully making better emails for your own company. But we'll open it up to any questions. We're going to invite Whitney on here, who has been hanging out with you guys in the chat and over on Twitter. So fire away, Whitney.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the early questions that we got is, we're talking about some examples that use personalization in images, but how do you take advantage of that functionality to its best advantage, knowing that many email clients or subscribers block images, or maybe for whatever reason those images don't load?
What we want to think about here is the fallback ideas and colors. So if you do a lot of images, again, you want to do a lot of text along with that as well. So we touched on some images, but if you're a preferred sender, like somebody's got to get a relationship with you anyways, they're going to want to see what's in the images. So the concept of blocking the images, yeah, it's a thing, especially if you have like a low download speed or something like that. But the hope is that you've built up enough trust that they will turn on those images.
So the other aspect of that is accessibility, right? So one thing that I would do is, in especially your sort of key information or key areas, is take a minute to make a thoughtful message for your accessibility. So a lot of people say, well, I don't have time for all that. Well, what if you just created a budget in your time? Let's say you have, 10 units of time. Just take one of those to look at and think through, like, what's the accessibility? And then, send a note. Here was an image that said this, and you can, in your note, in the alt text, you should be able to use some personalization, tools to kind of help them feel that. And the brand play there is that if you are showing care to the parts of your audience that are other abled, then you're really able to communicate that not just to them, but maybe communicate it to others. Like, here's something we're trying to do. Does anybody else have ideas? That kind of vulnerability and openness is really powerful for a brand. And I bet a lot of people would connect with that. So I actually don't know what data is available to know who is using screen readers to read emails, but I bet that you could then segment some of that audience and ask them, it looks like you're using a screen reader. We're really wanting to get better at this. What advice could you give us as a company that wants to grow in this? Like, how can we make this email more effective for you? And then share that with your broader audience and see if anybody has ideas, those kinds of things. But just at the simple level, just good alt text is a baseline.
Sort of the opposite of that longer question. Here's a shorter one. Any testing tips for avoiding personalization going wrong?
I mean, I would just say test anything, like test as many scenarios as you possibly can before you send it. So look at actual subscriber data and I feel like most CSPs have some sort of preview option for like per subscriber. So go through that, do a handful of different tests, like of random subscribers to see what it looks like, and then read that out loud, especially if you're using text, like read it out loud, make sure it's feeling natural, and then pay attention to those fallbacks. So anything you do have as a fallback for a missing data point, it still feels natural, still feels valuable, even if it's missing.
Yeah, on our side, whenever we do anything personalized, we always do the randomized check to make sure that the image is there that should be for that person, and then going back in the database and making sure I actually once a week at least I get called Mark in my emails, and it's a marketing email, so I have no idea where Mark came from because I've never signed up as a Mark before. But so I'm on some like spam bot list that has me as Mark Nelson instead of Mike Nelson, and those are easy to spot for me. But yeah, it really goes back to like randomizing and checking as much as you can based on inputs before you hit send.
The other thing I think you can do to give yourself a little bit of padding is to ask people, did we get this right? Or is there anything we could improve here? That humility and, again, vulnerability goes a long way. And I know a lot of companies feel like, no, that's not something we can do. I think there are ways of phrasing it that show like our attempt here is to really connect with you, whether that's like a stern focused business connection or deep emotional connection. There's lots of ways to write that copy so it feels right, but just to keep connecting. Our intent here is to be closer to you. Like, is that working? There's nonviolent communication or active listening as a psychological tool to develop and enhance and grow and mature your relationships. These are great tools. Like, the best thing that you might be able to do in your life is go get counseling and therapy and then use it in your job. This kind of stuff can be really powerful. So it's really neat to see how growing in your relationship and growing in your understanding of this kind of dynamic and then utilizing it authentically with customers can be really powerful. So I think just asking, did we get this right? And then if you got it wrong, it's like, you did get it wrong, but thanks for asking. That's the measure. So
Yeah, I don't think it has to be like overly complex either. Like you can, if you're doing some sort of personalization or like an interactive email or something like that, you can have maybe have something in the footer, like below that content. It says, yeah, does this look funny? Does this not make sense? Like give us some feedback, and that could trigger a reply to hopefully a monitored inbox. So you actually read that reply. Or this is where something like email preference centers come into play. So give people the option to update their email preferences, their subscriber data, like expose that to them so they can go in and update that as needed without too much of a hassle. I think there's lots of opportunities to get that information and improve it. Even if you get something wrong in one email, hopefully improve it for the next send and get that better and better data.
We have someone that asked the question. So they are coming from a B2B company and their audience data isn't as robust as, say, some of the B2C examples we were going through. So what tips can you guys give to really add that personalization level to B2B emails?
I've heard a lot of really interesting comments recently about the lack of information in B2B. So this is kind of a moment of anybody who's in B2B in this webinar. I'd love to hear from you, Matthew@reallygoodemails.com. I want to know more about what you're missing out there so we can provide for that. But in the meantime, my experience is that business to business, you want to make sure that you're really understanding what is frustrating to them in general. What did they hire your product to do for them? And then if you understand that relationship, then you're able to, again, treat it as a relationship. It's really no different than the customer experience. It's just that there's a team that's potentially hiring you instead of an individual. And so you begin, understanding the nature of that team, maybe through personas, maybe through interviews and actually spending time with them. But the more fidelity that you have on what's really challenging in their work life and why they hired your product to solve that problem, the more effectively you can just engage that relationship with either information that they needed that will help them save time, or curation that can help them save time, data or digest that help them save time. These kinds of efficiencies are often what B2B is about. So either data that's asymmetrical to what they know, and you're giving them something that they didn't have access to before. So it's like a key to a door that there's a room that they've never had access to that information, or it's saving them time and resources or money. So anything that you can do in there. But again, these are things that you learn and you isolate through understanding the challenges they're facing.
I think any of the examples we showed off today could have been a B2B email if you have the data. So if you have a sales team that's out selling to B2B buyers or something like that, or target market is another business, most likely they have some type of notes that they're writing on those individuals, or categories or tiers that they've hit for sales quotas or things like that. And that is probably all stored in some type of maybe Excel spreadsheet, maybe Salesforce.com, maybe something similar that you can export, clean it up a little bit. And that's probably the simplest way of going out and starting out with your personalization efforts. Like how much have they ordered in the past 6 months? Or how many times have they interacted with a sales rep in the last 3 months? Do we need to send another reminder on a webinar like today? There's a lot of things you can do there that are at your, the examples we gave are a lot of B2C examples, but you could swap out the logo and that could have been for anything.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes down to it, ask somebody, whether that's asking other teams, other departments, other people in your company, or ask the customers you're dealing with. While you are B2B and you're working with a company overall, like there's still people in the company that you have relationship with. So ask them what they want or what they need to see, try to get the information from them so you can build those more personal experiences. It's hard, but it's one of those things that's likely really worth doing, because you will see, like we saw earlier, you'll see better results for your email program. You'll see healthier relationships and just your program and your business grow overall, which is awesome. Cool. I think we're definitely way over time here. One last reminder that we did get together a collection over on Really Good Emails. I set up one with a lot of these examples and a couple of other personalization examples that I thought were really cool. So feel free to head over there. There's that bit.ly link. We'll put this over on the blog post as well. So check that out if you do want to look a little bit more at some of the examples, those full emails, the code powering them, all that good stuff. With that, just thank you everybody for hopping on and joining us for the past hour and 10 minutes talking about email personalization. I know I had a lot of fun. It's always a joy to have the Really Good Emails team on the webinars with us. And be sure to check out both Litmus and Really Good Emails, litmus.com, or over on Twitter, we're Litmus app, and then reallygoodemails.com, or on Twitter, your Really Good Email without the S. So definitely check that out, and check out the Litmus blog at litmus.com/blog. We'll post the recording and some of the questions we didn't get to, because it looks like there are probably a lot of them in the chat there. And Sweet. We will see everybody on the next webinar. Cheers.
Thank you all. Ciao, ciao.